Now that we've covered how to fix the errors that don't require re-recording, it's time to look at the ones that do. Earlier in this course, I said that whether to use pre-roll or not was up to you, and that remains true when you're doing the initial recording, but when you're doing pickups, pre-roll is pretty much mandatory. We use pre-roll because it's incredibly difficult to match tone, speed and cadence without hearing and joining in with the lead-in. So no matter what pickups you're doing, with the exception of one special situation, you need to turn pre-roll on with the toolbar button up here. I'm going to talk through that special exception before anything else. There are times when we realise that we've completely missed a line and there's no room to insert it without shifting everything to the right to make space first. I've also had occasions, even this year, where I've had an entire 2 to 3 minute long chunk missing from the end of a chapter when I've come to proof it. Almost universally, this has been caused by a freeze to Reaper or some sort of crash combined with me failing to realise I lost anything at the time. And this is where a shortcut I've termed ripple punch in becomes invaluable. This is a custom script, well actually it's 2 scripts, one to start and one to stop, that allows us to insert new audio without manually moving surrounding clips. For example, let's say that right here we have forgotten a simple dialogue tag saying he said. So instead of shifting everything forward manually, we simply click where we want the audio to go and we click this button for ripple punch in. We're going to record the missing phrase and we're going to click it again to stop recording. So if you have a quick keys or a different shortcut keyboard, this becomes even more convenient. So let me just show you. He said. As you can see, we have just inserted the he said right there. Sure, the time this saves if all you've missed is the words she said or he said is minimal. But if you've missed a whole sentence or a whole paragraph or 3 minutes of audio, well, in those circumstances, this method saves time and preserves alignment effortlessly, and it is a massive time saver. The one thing about using ripple punch in is that it works best if you have pre-roll disabled. But that's the only situation in which you would want it off. So for now, let's turn pre-roll back on. Next up is time selection auto punch, and this is used when we want to re-record over a section of audio without touching the surrounding material. To use it, double check that pre-roll is on, make a time selection starting at the beginning of the silence, of any silence before the section you want to record over, and ending at the end of any silence afterwards. So say I wanted to record over this bit of audio here. I would select from the beginning of the silence before to the end of the silence afterwards. You then make sure this button is clicked. This sets us to time selection auto punch instead of normal recording mode. You click this one to go back to normal recording mode if you're not doing pickups. Hit record and speak simultaneously with the audio. When playback gets to the start of the selection, it will stop, and instead the contents of the time selection will be overwritten with what you're saying. And at the end of the time selection, playback will begin again. Let me just demonstrate. Pilfered under circumstances most duplicitous. Circumstances most duplicitous. And now I'm going to talk a little bit and make up some words, and I'm still going to talk, and what you're going to see is I'm going to still be talking even when it finishes.
Listen, you elongated artichoke.
He wrote. So as you see, I actually continued talking at the end. Usually this happens because we've read at a slightly slower speed than the original recording. So it takes practice to be able to do this, but when it happens, you just need to finish what you're saying and ignore what you're hearing. Reaper is really clever here, and it actually records behind the visible waveform. So if I drag to the right here, which moves everything to the right, I can drag out the edge here, and you can actually hear up to these lines. This is where I actually stop the recording. It's going to play even when it finishes, and that doesn't matter much. There we are. Double check that there are no audible artifacts. If there are, either try and make sure that your items overlap again, or slightly adjust the trim of the items until you don't get any sort of effect. For example, there might be a little popping sound where you can see a little bit on the waveform there.
Minius perfidy knows no bounds.
Such perspicacious accusations wound me deeply.
Zarog smirked.
Such perspicacious accusations.
Oh, it's too loud, so let's drag this down a bit.
Knows no bounds.
Such perspicacious accusations wound me deeply.
Zarog smirked.
Oh.
And I've totally messed up the timing, so we'll drag this over here.
Accusations wound me deeply.
Zarog smirked.
Good.
Where using time selection auto punch increasingly comes into its own is that it's phenomenally useful for re-recording from partway through a word, and can even end partway through a word if you have your timing perfect. This all helps keep pickup recordings as short as possible, which means they're less likely to stand out if you're recording on a different day and you sound slightly different. However, even when re-recording, sometimes the new audio stands out because it's slightly louder or quieter than the surrounding material. Fortunately, fixing this is simple. Just click the item that you've just recorded, click this button up here, and type in a plus or minus value to adjust the volume of the item. You may, depending on how you've got things up, may also have a line you can drag up and down to adjust. The next thing I want to show you is free positioning mode. At the time of writing this course, I've only recently found out about this, and wow, has it been useful. The main thing we use free positioning for is to minimize the length of a pickup, especially on those annoying occasions where we can't, where we just can't get a recording on a different day to sound like it was part of the original recording. So we do our pickup using time selection auto punch, like I've just shown you. And then we turn on free positioning mode, which is under track and then down to free item positioning. When you do that, let me do that. It kind of moves the waveform up. I was working with many waveforms earlier, as you saw at the end of the last video, so hence why everything's been squished up so much. And then you can, where you've got the two sets of audio and you've over-recorded, you can make sure that the waveform matches up and then trim the audio just before and after the relevant part of the pickup. Okay, so I'm going to do this instead. Show you some free positioning. Belligerent bats to overly verbose spectres attempting interminable philosophical dialogues. Didn't matter that I got a bit lost at the end there. So, right, what we're going to do now is track, free item positioning. It's going to split it apart like this. So, so that goes here. Attempting interminable. Okay, so if we drag this here, we can see where the ting is. Make sure ripple's on. We're going to drag this to the right so that we've got the two aligned. I'm going to drag this over here. Let the two crossfade exactly across. Attempting in. And then something sounded a bit funny there, so I'm going to cut that back there, and I'm going to cut that back over here to there. So, spectres attempting interminable. There we are, much better. Remove that, mark this as done. So it either starts and stops during the silence between words or even syllables, or so that it starts and stops partway through some sibilance, or one of each, one at the beginning, one at the end. Sympathetic chuckle. Pathetic chuckle. Pathetic chuckle. Now this is a useful one because we can actually just overlap them. Sympathetic chuckle from the... eliciting a sympathetic chuckle from the crowd. And you can't tell that it's two separate recordings. If it turns out that one of the recordings has a pause between some syllables where there isn't a pause in the other one, just find a different point to do it. It's likely that at this point the waveforms aren't aligned, so check that ripple editing is on and drag left or right just to make sure everything's aligned. And then you add crossfades by dragging at the top corner. Can you see? Let me make this a bit clearer. If I pull this down, this happens regardless of the view. Just as you adjust the left and right by dragging down here, you adjust the fade by dragging at the top. Once the crossfades are there, you may also need to adjust the shape of the fades. So if we are crossfading on the gap between words, then we use an equal power crossfade, which is this default. It's flatter at the top, a little, and more vertical near the bottom, a little. If we're crossfading on a sibilant, however, then it's best not to use the default crossfade because there's the risk of creating a double S artifact, and instead use the S-curve crossfade down here and make sure that the centers match perfectly. So if I was doing that here, oops. I would make sure that those vertical points in the middle match perfectly. Finally, sometimes you're just going to have no choice but to crossfade in the middle of the word. In the middle of a word. If you do that, you might well be best off with either a linear crossfade. That looks like this. If you're wondering how I got to this, you right click, but you have to have your mouse right over the crossfade line. Linear crossfade is this one, or you might want to go down the manual curve route. And to say that is beyond my knowledge level would be an understatement. So please do your own research if that becomes necessary. And honestly, with spoken word, it's probably better just to do the pickup again and make it cover a wider selection. Once you've done the crossfades and testing it sounds good with a quick play through, you turn off free positioning mode and it will go back to looking normal like this. And in fact, you can see that I didn't quite get those crossfades to meet in the middle. So I could turn free item positioning back on and adjust the items, or I could adjust like that, except annoyingly it has re-defaulted back. There we are, but I've got it matching in the middle. Also, please don't forget that you're dealing with long-form content when recording audiobooks, so you may have hundreds of pickups. The most I've ever had was over 1,000 in a 22-hour audiobook. So that means that some edits just aren't worth the effort when you're dealing with that sort of number. So if you're having trouble with a pickup, ask yourself the following questions. 1, is this taking too long? 2, does this pickup sound obvious? As in, does it sound like it doesn't fit? And 3, is there something a bit off about this, which is very subjective, but you'll know what I mean. If the answer to any of those is yes, just give up and re-record the pickup.
So fast. Fast. Fast.
I appear to have squeaked in the middle of a word, so let's just highlight that. Let's see if this fixes it. Hit that a couple of times to drag that, to make that go down like that.
So fast.
No. Okay, what about like that?
Not so fast.
Honestly, I've got no idea. So I'm going to undo those. Hit undo a few times to do it. I'm just going to re-record over it. Over time, you'll get a handle on when a pickup is or isn't right before you start with the free positioning, so you will lose less and less time to that sort of situation. Well, that is all you need to know about recording and editing your pickups. And in fact, that's it for the majority of the course. This is basically retail ready. Now, you just render it again and deliver it. I will see you one last time in the conclusion, where I will cover the remaining shortcuts, scripts and toolbar buttons that I've included as extra but non-essential bonuses. Before then, there is an entirely optional bonus video in which you can see me edit the 2 chapters that you saw me record earlier. And I'll also cover stuff like how to contact me and like that sort of thing in the final video. I will see you in the final video. I can't wait.